Good day, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you're watching. The two-way experience begins now. This is the morning meeting. Sean, Dan, and I will take you through the day in exquisite detail, kick it around with peace, love, and understanding, analyze, dissect, discuss, and then, with the presumption of grace to all, we'll bring you in for questions if you're watching here on the two-way platform. Please raise your yellow hand if you want to get in. We've had so many new people this week. I've stopped, you'll notice, making the threat to cancel the show if we don't have new people. And if you're watching on YouTube or X, incredible. Thank you for being part of the two-way experience. And as always, don't put smack in the chat. If you want to disagree with someone, please do, but personal attacks, not particularly welcome. Comments about cute children running in the background of our shots, extremely welcome. Feel free to do that. Sean, I love that shirt. Is that available for the whole audience if we want to buy one of those?
It's just the beta. But if you own a embroidery shop and want to send me samples, I love swag and free stuff. So
what size?
I'll say
what size?
It pops. You can actually read Sean Spicer. Usually it's hard to read that logo.
yeah, I'll give them. I'll let them know.
Crisp.
Oh, you'll let them know what size. All right. And Sean, as a child, what was the most tiresome jibe you would get about your name?
Like scene that one? Like you mean like that?
Yeah, what do people say? They call you Spicy Spice or whatever. Like, what was
no,
the
it's
thing
mostly the
you're
first.
sick
Yeah,
of?
yeah, that came later. I'd say it was like scene girl from like
Scene,
to like
calling you
eighth
scene. Yeah.
grade. Yeah.
Yeah. Very annoying, very tiresome. Not as tiresome as getting on an elevator, going up, having three people press the buttons, and someone saying, this is the local. It's very tiresome to me. Thank you for joining. Here we go. First, let's look at the president's pool today, 101. Sean, as always, our expert on pool analysis. I don't see anything new today. I think the things here that are notable we've seen before, but anything you
Really?
want to comment on?
You've seen Timcast before? I haven't.
Where's Timcast?
New media in town pool.
New media in town pool. Timcast. I was looking in the wrong place. Sorry. Sean, what about Timcast and HuffPost? Interesting choices, eh?
Well, HuffPost, just to be clear, is in the White House Correspondents Association pool rotation. So that's, I mean, it's surprising that they're still there and that they're credible. Timcast is a nightly program. Well, it's much more than that now, hosted by Tim Pool, live every night, and then he's got a bunch of now additional shows that air on YouTube and probably some other platforms. But really, actually, it's sort of a huge following live every night that goes on for like 3 hours. So I'm actually intrigued who's going to do this. He's got a few people that sort of are his regular gang every night, and I wonder who's going to
gets
play
the
that
seat.
position.
In any case, it's certainly a controversial decision, and Timcast is controversial in terms of their content, a huge following. So let's go to the schedule, because as you'll see, it's not clear that Timcast is going to get to ask very many questions, because the president today is doing the swearing in that the pool's there for, maybe there. That's an interesting swearing in. Sean, tell us who the new U.S. Attorney for New Jersey is and why some are curious at her taking the position.
Well, it's actually interesting. Just before I even get to that, on the schedule, it listed as the U.S. Attorney for New Jersey. My understanding is Alina Habba, current counselor of the president, who's filling that, is the interim U.S. Attorney. So I don't know if that's just an oversight or if they've actually changed.
It clearly hasn't changed, because she had a confirmation hearing. She was just picked a few days ago.
Right.
So you're right. It should say interim.
Yeah, she's supposed to be the interim U.S. Attorney for New Jersey. The current one, I'm trying to remember what the president nominated him to be ambassador. So she will go to New Jersey and handle that. And again, just as a point of protocol, the president doesn't, and the reason it says participates is the president doesn't swear U.S. officials into office. So he will participate, meaning he stands there while another U.S. official does it.
And then he leaves for Andrews and goes to Florida. I shouldn't have said Timcast won't get a question, because that event is ripe for a photo opportunity with a lot of questions, because the new acting interim or whatever U.S. attorney and the president both like to take a lot of questions. All right. The vice president is off to Greenland. He took off at, I think, 6 a.m. this morning Eastern time with his wife. The national security advisor and other officials are going. As we said before, they're no longer going to the dog sled competition. in theory, they're just going to the U.S. Space Force base, although I got one indication that they may make at least one other stop. We shall see.
I gotta say that it's not a big footprint that's there. There's
Yeah.
not that many people. I mean, so if you're gonna go, you
Yeah.
could probably check that box in 10
Yeah.
minutes.
I think they're going to make another stop. It would be my educated prediction. But it's also the case that politicians in both Denmark and Greenland continue to not be super excited about this visit. The defense secretary continues his trip in Asia today, and Congress is gone, but there's a lot going on with them. So with that, let's talk about Elise Stefanik. Her nomination withdrawn last night. Clearly, even if you don't think the Republicans could lose that very red district, Kathy Hochul, with capacity to set the date for the special meant they might be down a seat. Not that they would necessarily lose it, but they wouldn't have the seat. There continues to be concern about at least one and perhaps both of the races for specials in Florida next week, the Gates seat and the Waltz seat. So, Sean, is this a Karl Rove induced panic? Is it a Tony Fabrizio induced panic? What is causing the president to suddenly be very concerned about going down an additional House Republican seat?
Well, I mean, the math is obviously concerning. I mean, that's the bottom line. And the question is, to your point,
the math of in the House
math
margin
on the House, whether or not the House will maintain a majority. It's not just about one seat. You got to plan ahead. I mean, one seat, somebody could get sick, family issues. There's all sorts of obvious things that happen, or potential things, I should say. I don't want to hope any of that happens to anybody, but I think that there's a real concern, and two things. One is, Kathy Hochul made it very clear she's going to slow walk this. Two, I think that the president at some point recognized, hey, I can get somebody else, and I need somebody at the UN, and I don't know how long I can wait. And it's not, I mean, I'm friends with Elise. I think she's a very smart woman, but I also think that it's not like that's a position that she's perfectly tailored for. There's obviously other options, and she could serve again, after the majority gets back up. But to your point, I think the bigger concern right now is that 6th district, where Senator Randy Fine is the Republican nominee for the seat formerly held by Mike Waltz. This is very concerning. I mean, he is not a good candidate. He is not raising money, and conversely, the left is fired up financially, and so I think that there's a concern that if this were to happen, and then you would have to pull her after the fact, it would show panic. So I think they're trying to get ahead of it, but it's not a good sign, because you could have waited and see how things turned out. So it's a little, to be honest with you, it's still a little mystifying to me, because I'm not sure why you wouldn't have waited. In a general election, just to be clear, those 2 seats are fine. In a special election where turnout is key and you can juice your folks, it's a very different dynamic. But if a Dem were to pull off a win, it's an 18-month win, and it's just a black eye.
Dan.
Yeah, I think it's a little more than that. I think Sean's right. It's about the margin in the House. It's about the optics and the, kind of worry about what's happening down in Florida. Look, I think there's another thing, which is the game is about to shift to Congress here with this reconciliation package. And it's really going to be kind of the spring and, potentially into the summer. We've talked about before the August recess. What will start to make Republicans nervous is if, let's say, they lose Florida, or even the Republican wins by like 2 points. And then you have a New York district. I actually think Hochul could potentially move that up to make it sooner. If it's a plus 20 or 25 Republican district and you lose it, or again, you only win by 1 or 2, what you get are all these people in districts that are like 10 to 15 plus R, who start to say, if 20, 25, and 30 is a margin of error, I am in trouble. Do I want to go along with this? Do I want to start slow walking this? This is what happened to Democrats in 2009 as they went into the healthcare bill, right? And so I think there's the psychology of like Democrats get off the mat, Republicans start to ask some hard questions.
Well, if you lose that sixth district in Florida, to Dan's, I mean, I think this is what Dan's saying, but I'd be very concerned about getting down. I mean, if then you go into a Dem seat, I mean, that seat where a lot's really on the line, and so you at least lock Elise in. She's going to win. and win big. But I mean, honestly, I feel bad for her because she gave up a House leadership seat. Her staff, for obvious reasons, said, "Okay, we're going to go find another job." So it's definitely a huge letdown personally.
Yeah, I have some indications that not only is it a letdown for her, but she resisted. She did not want to give up the UN slot, having, as Sean, you just said, move towards changing things.
Can I make one more point, Mark? I will
Yeah.
say the other tell for me is when and who they announce to fill this. So in other words, if they announce this afternoon that the new replacement is Bob Smith or something, whatever, that says to me that they had a bigger plan in mind, right? That maybe there was a sort of, they were like ready to bring in the lefty.
Yeah.
And so when and how and who, to me, is going to be a big tell. How soon
Yeah.
do they announce, and who is it? Is it some friend of the president where they say, "Oh, this was going to be
Yeah.
easy, just announce my buddy"?
There's some people around the president who don't think they should fill the job, by the way. So I'm not sure they'll announce anybody anytime soon. Um, Look, if they lose next week, and just based on what we've already seen, this makes candidate recruitment for 26 much easier for Democrats.
Yep.
Much easier to raise money, to bring in the best possible candidates for the competitive seats. And I will tell you, the mood music amongst Republicans about the need to withdraw Stefanik and what's going on in Florida, the mood music is very dark, very concerned. Not that they're going to lose them, but very concerned. Now, I will say this. I have said many times Congress does not act until it absolutely has to, and sometimes not even then. We've talked about the forcing mechanism for reconciliation. We've talked about the August recess. We've talked about the need to raise the debt ceiling if they included the debt ceiling in the reconciliation. We've talked about the expiration of the Trump tax cuts. We've talked about Christmas. I believe now that there's a possible new forcing mechanism because of the panic or near panic about what's going on in these House races as a canary in the coal mine, which is the forcing mechanism is going to be we have to do it quickly because tariffs and Doge and some other things are not popular. Tax cuts, including the new Trump tax cuts, if they can figure out the square peg in the round hole, tax cuts, tax cuts on Social Security benefits and overtime and all that, tax cuts, energy, regulation reform. Then maybe they just say to folks, guys, we got to get this down and done now. We all agreed this is our agenda. We all want it done. They'll make up a date and they'll get it done. And that could end up being a big silver lining for them, assuming they can execute on it to get that done sooner. And that, of course, allows the president to try to roll into some new type of big project with reconciliation passed, if that happens. Dan, what do you think of my theory?
Oh, I think it's absolutely spot on because look, you have consumer confidence is starting to decline. And what you are getting potentially is if consumers get anxious and nervous, and what do we see in poll after poll? Frustration that there isn't more focus about the economy, right? The last couple of weeks, we rarely talk about, Trump rarely talks about the economy. It's been Ukraine and Doge and, the signal stuff. And like, he got elected because people said he had a good first term on the economy. I want that again. That was the driving thing that Harris could just never, Biden penetrate. And if that doesn't get done till the fall, it just can start to spiral. Whereas if they can put the points on the board, they can go to the electorate and say, we passed this, give it time. Those are the things we did for you for the economy. And, I think people will give them a break.
That's the Ron
Sean.
Johnson argument he made.
Yep.
We played that clip the other day. Ron Johnson's basically saying, get the points on the board, get the easy stuff done, stop delaying this, get some relief, get the agenda moving, get people to realize, hey, we got positive stuff happening. Don't slow walk this. I'm becoming more of a fan of this. I think you're right. The tariffs. Look, I applaud the president for his efforts on trying to bring investment back to America and manufacturing. It's great, but it's not going to be a good show. I mean, I think there's going to be a couple weeks, a month, or whatever, where it's not helpful. It's not good, and they need something to point to. I think this might be an interesting game changer.
Yeah. All right. Quick responses on this one, if you would. Judges, we've seen more adverse rulings. Very few things have gone to the Court of Appeals yet, and almost nothing to the Supreme Court. But Sean, how big is a problem for the administration, these adverse rulings, not just in the short term, but if as many now predict, not partisans, but others, that this is going to end up with a lot of negative rulings on Doge and on immigration and on other issues that are important to the president?
I think the district court level is a problem. I think many of the folks that I talk to believe that a lot of the stuff will get, whether it's the appeals court or the Supreme Court, ruled in the president's favor. The question is, I think it's very frustrating. Again, this gets back to points on the board. If you're doing stuff, and it's like pause, pause, pause. So it's not good for political momentum right now. That's why I think you're hearing a lot of talk out of, at least out of Speaker Johnson, about narrowing the, district court rulings should focus on districts, not necessarily nationwide, and what we can do to deal with that. But it's not helpful. It's just when it's like throwing stuff on the train track. It makes the train go a lot slower.
Dan.
Yeah, and I think it feeds the Democratic narrative that they're out of control, that this is reckless. And so I think the more the judges speak up, and by the way, that is our system of government. They are a co-equal branch. A lot of Democratic presidents have, mashed their hands over court rulings. So this is not a partisan thing, but it does feed the narrative the Democrats want to take to the electorate.
All right. 108, please. Here's some good news for the administration on the economy, which remains decidedly mixed, both in the data and in the polling. Core inflation, hotter than expected. Is that good news for Trump? I don't think that is.
No. Bad news for Trump.
All right, let me change it up. Leave that up there. Leave that up there. I thought it was good news for Trump. I'm going to do my John McLaughlin imitation. Item, core inflation in February hits 2.8, hotter than expected. There's some other things going on besides the signal matter that are good news for Democrats and that are causing Democrats to say the resistance is now resisting. Let me give you some examples besides that.
Can I make one quick point on inflation?
Yes, sir.
As since I drove carpool this morning and went through Old Town Alexandria as my full analytical analysis here. When you go to the grocery store, and I think this is how most people view inflation, egg prices are way down. You're not talking about $3 a dozen versus upwards of $5. They were selling unleaded gas in Old Town Alexandria, 283 and 280. That's huge, right? And so when you actually look at what are those things that are driving your costs in your daily budget, gas, household items, again, part of this is the narrative. I've said this before, like government numbers are one thing, but like people know inflation. They go to a grocery store, they go to the gas pump, right or wrong, that's what they feel. And I think one of the things that's working in Trump's favor is that egg prices, gas prices, things like that, where they're going and saying, hey, this is not bad.
Yeah, but you hear it from any business person, small, medium, large. There's real danger of stagflation because there's animal spirits have been dampened. People don't want to invest. It's strange to have right track be so high and consumer confidence be so low. I've not seen anybody reconcile those two things. You'd think they'd be somewhat correlated, but consumer confidence is low and right track is higher than it's been in, I think, 20 years or something. Either of you want to reconcile that?
I think part of this is just a gut. I mean, like, I hate this. I'm not trying to make this partisan, but I think for a while, like, you didn't, even if you were a Democrat or independent, you didn't think that Biden was trying, right? And there was this sense of whatever. And I think I get the feeling that people are giving Trump a pass on a lot of stuff, meaning they are like, okay, he's out there doing stuff. There's activity. But I still think there's a problem. So it's sort of like, I still think there's a problem, but I feel better about how it's being addressed. That's at least my take.
Yeah, and I think it's action. It's the ending the DEI stuff, the cultural attacks, the show of force on immigration. Like, I think people say I like this because generally those are very popular items. But I do think, as you say, Mark, there is growing consumer worry about the economy. People are hopeful that Trump will kind of like get to it because they believe in him. But you're right. And the oil executive, I think it was in the Journal, who said the industry is just like fed up with these tariffs. And this is like an industry that should be number one, drill, baby, drill. And they're like, it's a slogan and he's terrible.
Right. And of course, the tariff announcement is next week. Put up 103, please. Immigration is an issue that up until now, despite Democrats' usually principled objections, has worked to the president's favor. And probably maybe even because of the Democrats' objections. So Trump takes aim at foreign-born college students, revoking 300 visas. Democrats are pointing to that. Now, here's a video, 104, please. This is a Boston area student being detained on the streets of the Boston area.
That's Medford, Mass, at
Yep.
Tufts University.
Yeah. Tufts is in both Somerville and Medford, but Sean is correct, the Medford area. So this video is getting a lot of attention. And the story of this student is getting a lot of attention because of well, you can see what's happening here. This people are reacting negatively to the nature of the dress of the people who are taking her into custody and of the nature of the number and kind of the body language of it. Dan, is immigration an issue that's working in favor of the resistance now or not?
It could. I mean, we've talked about this for months, that images of criminals and gang members, I think gets a lot of cheering from Americans. But we've always said once the images of kind of real people, and this appears to be a run-of-the-mill college student with the backpack getting ready to go to class, and it looks like the SWAT team picking up a, rapist off the street. Like, and I think the question is obviously going to be, why this person? And I think when it's that they chanted something at a rally, I think a lot of Americans start getting queasy about that. I mean, I think there is real support for criminals, but once you move beyond that, the public is not so black and white.
Particularly in cases which seem to involve at least somewhat speech as opposed to illegal action. Sean.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's 2 points. Dan used the word, I think, appears to be, and I think for a lot of people, that's they see something, an image, and they go, what does that appear to be, right? If you go down the rabbit hole on this individual has made some pretty radical comments with respect to support for Hamas.
That's speech. That's speech.
Right, which is also a designated foreign terrorist organization, and you are here on a visa. So I mean, this is where the law gets in particularly interesting. What have you agreed? If you're coming to our country and you're providing support one way or another for a terrorist organization, where is that line? That's something that, again, I think there's a big difference between a U.S. citizen and somebody here who is on a visa or as a guest to this country, and the organizations that they're coming here to support or drum up support for.
Right.
I mean,
so
there's just a rich irony that you're trying to clean up Ivy League universities for limiting conservative speech, and you're also arresting students because you don't like their speech.
I think there's a difference line, Dan, between someone expressing concerns for higher or lower taxes or DEI policies and providing support to a terrorist organization.
Look, there are a lot of people who would say there were Republicans who spoke up about certain groups in the United States that were designated domestic terrorist organizations, and people said on the right they have every right to say that.
Yeah,
and I think if you're a U.S. citizen, there's a difference between. I get there's a big difference, and I said that a minute ago. What you can say as a citizen and what you can say as a guest coming into our country.
Yep, there's a difference. The question is, where's the line? So, a few more data points that Democrats are bringing up with me to paint a portrait that grows somewhat of the Signal incident, but more generally of what an administration that they say is incompetent, arrogant, violating meaningful norms. You've got more cases of measles. You've got some of these liberal law firms not following the Paul Weiss model, but rather going to the mattresses, lawyering up with the prestige other outside firms to fight being targeted by Donald Trump. Okay. You have, as we discussed earlier, you have some of these political special elections that are worrying to Republicans. You also have this grassroots energy that we've talked about. And finally, they're making enemies with some of these policy changes. Cuts are hard, right? On Signal, you've got not just veterans, but you've got some active duty military concerned. New York Times story today about some active duty folks who fly who are worried about what happened with the Signal disclosure. You have farmers who are upset, part of MAGA base. You have vets who are upset, part of MAGA base. And now you've got cuts at HHS, including at least talked about cuts on medical research that are upsetting people who are part of MAHA, who think fighting disease is part of MAHA. So last night, one of America's leading analysts of the Democratic Party appeared on TV to talk about the question of wither the resistance. Let's listen. 105, please.
That guy.
Like, we want change. And I'm a big kind of Darwinian fan
they're, Hakeem Jeffries, Chuck Schumer are either going to step up and meet the moment or they're not. And you're seeing primary challenges. And I think like Mitch McConnell and Paul Ryan, the party may be moving on. And those two may not be the best representatives going forward.
So you're going to see warfare. You're going to see all these guys cooed, doged, primaried, and they're going to fight back, though. They're not just going to take this lightly.
We're going to see. I mean, I think you got, Jan Schakowsky, who's 80 years old. She's been in Congress for 26 years. She's facing a 26-year-old, right, who's already got 5 million views in her kickoff video. And Schakowsky keeps saying, I don't know if I want to run, right? Chuck Schumer, you're right. It's always not a question of like who's there, but who the alternative is. I think you'll see people that will challenge him. And next time he may only get, 5 people against him, then it'll be 10. Same thing that happened to Mitch McConnell.
So can the Democrat establishment fight a rear guard action against their base and take on Donald Trump at the same time?
No, but
without a media that usually carries their water?
No, I mean, and I think this is the thing. Our establishment has no power. And it's becoming clearer and clearer these days. And so I think you will see the change come from the bottom up. I think you will see people defeated. And look, right now we have no agenda, but I think you will get new energy, new candidates, and then we will get an agenda.
And
Sean, is that sharp-dressed man correct?
Yeah, largely. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Dan, as we head into the weekend, wither the resistance. What are the things you're seeing in terms of confidence and cohesion and policy and personality that are working on an optimistic way for the Democrats?
Look, I want to say, I definitely don't think that Trump is collapsing and is terrible. Like, I think Trump has a lot of strength. That said, I think this has been the best week for the Democratic Party since I joined your show in late September. It is the first time that we kind of got on a front foot a little bit. And I think the resistance is not fighting Trump. It's fighting our own party, which is causing change. Like, they are not taking the, like, hey, trust us anymore. And so I think we talked about the good stuff on Signal. We haven't even really talked about that special election in Pennsylvania where the rural district in Lancaster, Democrats pulled it off. We're seeing some progress across these fronts. Some of Doge, real lives of real people are being impacted. Like I just said, we don't have an agenda yet, but I think confidence starts to, cause unity, starts to bring you together, and momentum can beget momentum. And I think this was a good week. I also think I teased it on X last night. I didn't respond to all of you because I was saving it for here. I think you will see Elon Musk's comment that this is a revolution in a lot of Democratic TV ads, because the middle of the electorate that decides things did not sign up for a revolution.
Well, I think some of them did. Otherwise, I agreed with everything you said. Sean, what do you think about the status of the party this week and headed into next week?
I will agree with Dan in that sense that I do think it's probably the best week that the Dems have had in quite some time, in the sense that this was something where unforced errors gave them something to rally about. And I said this before, last week, I thought was a horrible week for Chuck Schumer. This was sort of the lifeline that he needed to sort of point everyone in a different direction. So that was positive for him. So on that front, I will yield that. I think that, Trump has always been brilliant about regrouping and refocusing, and you've seen that a little already. So I think one of the things, by the way, totally prior to Dan taking over Fox last night, Brett had a really good interview with a bunch of the folks from Doge, who I think made some really, really fantastic points about what they're doing to reform government and make it better, and just kind of highlighted some of the real systemic problems that exist in the bureaucracy to do what we're supposed to be doing for the American people. And I wish they would do more of that. I agree.
And if you haven't watched the whole thing, you should. It's really educational. And
Mark, can I just give a shout out to my old boss, Hillary Clinton? You put it in the day book. I thought her op-ed, we can all criticize whether she's, the best messenger today. That was a blunt, in your face, just punch, punch, punch. And I think it will give some steel to the spine of some of these, rank and file members who are totally weak and paralyzed since November, to just speak bluntly and get in the game.
Yep, I agree. 2 op-eds, if you haven't read, you should read. One is Secretary Clinton's, and the other is Peggy Noonan. Peggy writes about the Signal thing in a very sophisticated way, with her normal, fairness and brilliant writing. So I recommend that to you. Okay, so last topic before we do winners, losers, and what to look for. Dan, what's pending on the Signal story? Obviously, we still don't know how Jeffrey Goldberg got on the chain, but what are you looking for into the weekend and next week on that story?
I actually think this story is going to start to die down a little bit. I think the only thing I can really think of that would truly kick this back up is if there are more Signal chats that of similar nature.
And I've not seen that, and I've not seen that question addressed anywhere. I've not seen anybody say, "Well, yeah, we used it regularly."
Yep.
Maybe it happened in the hearings, so I didn't see the whole thing. Sean, what's your sense of where it's headed?
I think this is, unless something new happens, this should be done.
Yeah.
I think it's,
Okay.
I'll be honest with you. I think it lasted 48 hours longer than it should have. Probably 72.
The more I think about it, it's a little bit strange that there was good cop, bad cop. The president said, it was a mistake, shouldn't happen again. He seemed to be talking more about letting Jeff Goldberg on than the disclosure of the information. But as you just suggested, and others have, what kept it alive to a large extent was the combative nature of the National Security Advisor and the Secretary of Defense. Maybe they felt they had to do it to defend themselves politically, but they all could have just said what the president said, and it probably would have tamped down a little sooner.
Mark, one thing too that a smart person on our chat has said, I don't think Trump has said anything in defense of Vance, which is an interesting thing. That there is silence. Just leave that out there for your weekend thinking.
You think that's why he got added to the Greenland trip?
Yeah, it's not coming back. Sean, winner of the week.
So this might, I think the winner of the week, maybe it's just because I live here in Virginia and I care more, but I'm going to go with the FBI. I think what Kash Patel and Dan Bongino and the team did to take a big MS-13 ganger off the map here is a big win for the country, for the FBI. It gives a lot of confidence in what they're doing. And so that was, I just don't think it got the credit it deserves. I think it's a huge win for the country and a huge win for them.
Dan.
The Democrats for the reasons we just discussed.
Okay. It's a tie. The Democrats for the reasons we just discussed, and Speaker Johnson and John Thune and their relationship. Those guys are getting stuff done in meetings without forcing mechanisms of the normal nature. I really think it's undercovered story how closely they're working, given that they're hurting separate cat groups and very complicated. Sean, loser of the week.
Jasmine Crockett. I think she beclowned herself in her comments about Governor Abbott, dug herself deeper, has continued to make the rounds on a lot of things, and it just in a week that the Democrats should be killing it, has been a massive, massive embarrassment.
Dan.
Yes, I will just put that as an amendment to my winner of the week because Sean is correct. I'm going to say the U.S. auto industry shareholders. It's been talked about a lot of the U.S. manufacturing. The parts come from overseas. It's going to have a real financial impact to these auto industry companies. And you have President Trump saying, do not raise your prices, essentially threatening them. And so the shareholders may end up bearing the brunt of getting squeezed by tariffs and overbearing president.
My loser of the week is every official who was on that Signal call, none of whom said, guys, take it to the high side. This should not be being done on Signal. All of them, I think, are going to pay some price for it of one sort or another, and should. Sean, what are you looking for this weekend?
Two things. One is I do think that the reaction in Greenland, to your point, is going to be interesting. When you send the vice president and ratchet it up a notch, I think you're going to be, there's going to be an interesting dynamic. Either he's going to be, there's going to be some kind of diplomatic reaction. The other thing, to Dan's point on tariffs, I think this weekend, the Mar-a-Lago patio is going to be like, they're going to be selling tickets, because every lobbyist in every industry is trying to understand what this April 2nd thing is going to look like. You've seen the president's comments. Some countries may do better than others. They might not all be reciprocal. And everyone in the greater DC area that is in the lobbying world or industry is doing their darndest to make sure that they get a carve out, an exception, a lower rate.
Anyone who doesn't have someone who's on the patio this weekend who's trying to get not just influence on the outcome, but information, is not earning their money if they're being paid to be a player on this. Dan,
I
what are you looking
volunteer to
for?
be our Palm Beach Airport,
Okay.
correspondent to look at the private jet tail numbers flying in there this weekend. I am watching Wisconsin, and Elon Musk is going there, I believe, this weekend to campaign. So you're upping this a little. What is the reaction to Musk? Is he still the guy who, from the fall, was, I think, an asset to Donald Trump, an asset to MAGA and candidates, or is Musk potentially not helpful? We'll see.
Actually, I think that just that race in Wisconsin, by the way,
Yeah,
that's
in general. Yep.
the trifecta. I think, yeah.
And the expectation setting this weekend.
We don't discuss our answers in advance. And Dan, that's exactly what I was going to say. I'm just so curious to see how he's received, what kind of events he does, and what the reaction is, because he's really now inserted himself into politics, not just with spending money, but with going out and campaigning and making public appearances and on Fox News last night. So super curious about that. And then I'll be curious to Sunday shows, how much they talk about Signal and, of course, basketball. All right, now it's time for your questions. As always, please raise your hand if you'd like to get in the conversation. Grateful to see so many people participating this week. And tell us after you unmute where you are and what is on your mind. Sorry, I'm so impressed by how many people we have on here. It's very nice. Let's just look at my list here. Ryan, welcome in. Tell folks who don't know where you are, what's on your mind, please.
Okay, what an honor to speak to you guys. I'm from South Louisiana, close to the Gulf of America, I guess. I worked out there, an oil field guy. But anyway, what I wanted to say was I watched the Doge interview last night. And it's pretty inspiring to see so many smart, talented, successful business people make a sacrifice to try to make things better. Number one. And then number two, I also saw Scott Bessant and Howard Lutnick on the All In podcast. Again, two very successful guys who are making a big sacrifice for the country, I think, right? Like sacrificing themselves. And it's a bit disappointing to see how much anger those guys are getting, right? Because they're trying to do better. Like, I don't think they're like very partisan. I think they're just trying to do better for the country, right? So I guess my question is, do you think this is something, let's say a Democrat gets elected in 2028, do you think this is something that would continue, Dan? Or is just a one-off?
Well, look, I think respectfully, there's a lot of amazingly talented people in government. And it's one of the reasons that so many people are angry about the way Doge is going about what they're doing. Because yes, these kind of like what I'll call celebrities are there. And I agree with you. And Sean alluded to this. Seeing the real people in Doge who looked a little uncomfortable and nervous, very humanizing, you're empathetic, speaking about why they're there and what they're doing was excellent. But respectfully, there are so many really talented, smart people in government who have been there for 20 years, who go in every day, are experts and giving their life or their career in service of our government, that a lot of people just call faceless bureaucrats and the enemy of the state, and they're not. And so I think, I hope more people will serve. I think the way government is treated and looked at by the public, some of the things Elon Musk has said, makes it harder in red or blue America to recruit people into government.
Sean.
So, I mean, just to answer your question, I think if a Democrat gets in, none of this happens. It stops, full stop, the day one. They would actually probably take pride in ending it.
In ending what, Sean? In
Doge,
you mean?
To Doge. I think you can hear some of the chatter. Look, here's the one thing that I had this discussion with Bill O'Reilly the other night. Bill has some issues with Elon. And the point that I made was, if you don't get somebody of his stature, it doesn't happen. So people have tried, I mean, like when you do these things in government, you saw even with a few weeks back, this pushback from the cabinet secretaries, most of these guys would storm, just steamroll over anyone that doesn't have the stature and relationship that Elon does. And so having these people come in with the top cover that they have, and like I said, the beauty of what I loved about the conversation last night was them just talking about some common sense things. And I thought the way that they talked about, to Dan's point, a lot of the other people in government who are trying to do the right thing and the inability of them to be able to execute on it because of silly regulations or outdated, forms or processes, really is, and that's the issue, is exposing some of this. They made at one point the fact that there are 40 CIOs, chief information officers at HHS, right? You need 40 people to be the chief information officer in one department. There are 4.6 million government credit cards and 2.1 million employees. So that's a lot of extra government credit cards floating around. There were some basic things that I think they have helped expose that most Americans were probably, yeah. And Deborah's noting 1,400 people to give out phones and laptops at the IRS. There were just some things where you realize, okay, is that smart? And I appreciate their service, their sacrifice, because a lot of them make a lot more money and don't have to deal with this kind of stuff. So,
Yeah, I mean, I also heard in some of the interviews, those guys say there are a lot of great federal employees, which I know there are, right? There's great employees in every organization. So, but still, I mean, for people that have worked, in the private sector, I mean, sometimes there's a lot of things that can be made more efficient, right? So there's yeah. So
don't
I mean,
underestimate
they did
the number of people who went into the Obama administration and the Biden, who worked for Google and Facebook and Goldman Sachs, successful, talented people. They weren't at the top; they were in the middle, right? Yeah. And I think so. I actually disagree, Sean. Bill Clinton cut government. Barack Obama did some reforms. The degree to which Elon is doing it is unique. We're going to see if that's good or bad.
Yeah, Ryan, you work in energy?
Yeah, I mean, I've worked in the oil field.
Yeah,
and for a long time.
How far are you from the Gulf?
Well, I mean, I'm working overseas now, but I worked. I mean, I grew up 20 minutes from the Gulf.
Yeah.
In South Louisiana.
What are people back home calling it?
Well, I mean, when I worked offshore, in the late 90s, we used to joke about it, right? So it's like, why is this? I mean, to me, it doesn't matter, but
yeah,
I think it's a little bit a bit of a troll, right?
How'd you start? Yes, sir. More than a little bit. How'd you start watching two-way?
I've always, I love sports. In fact, I had a basketball question for you. To me, politics has always been a bit like sports to me. And I read your stuff back in, I don't know, when McCain and Obama. So I searched close to the election for your name, and then I found this platform.
Great. So, well, we're happy to have you here. Thank you for watching. Grateful for you.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm right. Duke's going to win, right?
Is that a Duke blue? Like, are you going? Is that?
No, that's a Carolina blue.
No,
that's a little darker.
Just a shirt. George, welcome in. Tell folks who don't know where you are, what's on your mind, please. After you unmute. There you go.
There we go. Well, it's an honor, gentlemen.
Honored to have you here. Thank you, sir.
Thanks for being here.
This is a great platform. I got hooked by seeing your interviews, Mark, on some platforms that I watched prior to the election. You seem like a superb human being, very fair,
very kind of you. Thank you.
And Dan, you're my favorite Democrat by far. I love your smile, love your clothes, love your takes. Sean, you're great as well. So it's just great to be here. I really love how you guys interact with the guests. It kind of reminds me of listening to talk radio back in the day when you'd have sort of longer, conversations with your people that you invite in. You really listen to them and ask probing questions. And I just find that part of it pretty fascinating. So
thank you.
Super grateful to you. By the way, starting Monday, we become more like a morning zoo format. So there are going to be sound effects and quizzes and concert ticket giveaways. No, just kidding. Thank you for joining, George. Thank you for your kind words. Tell us what you want to either say or ask?
Yeah, God, there's so many things. Uh, one of the things that I want to tell you about my personal experience with the NIH cuts.
Where do you
Um,
live?
I live in Florida.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm a physician, but this has to do with my daughter. I'm a Trump voter. I was a never Trumper when he announced, and then he just gradually won me over the last several elections. Um, as far as the NIH cuts go, as you guys probably know, they're capping um, the indirect cost for their grants. It's going to save about $4 billion. And my daughter, who's finishing up her PhD at Berkeley in chemistry, uh, she was all lined up for a postdoc at MIT, and she got the acceptance, and then a week later it got pulled. MIT basically put a halt on all new hires. She's got a lot of cohorts in STEM that have had the same thing happen to them. Lost professorships, lost jobs, lost postdocs. Basically, these institutions are basically putting everything on hold, freezing everything. So she's in tears. People's careers, very smart, brilliant people are just left in a lurch. Many of them are getting advised to maybe go to Europe to see if they can continue their academic careers. So I see it as a real problem. Um, Mainly, you're talking about very high level functioning individuals who are going to contribute to science meaningfully. Um, and on the other hand, they're trying to save $4 billion, which is relatively peanuts in the looking at all of government spending. So I think it's not a really good bang for the buck. The other thing is that these institutions who are getting cut, they have gigantic endowments. Like if you just look at Harvard and MIT combined, they have about $75 billion in endowments. And now the whole NIH cuts are going to save $4 billion total across all institutions. So you know that whatever kind of cuts Harvard and MIT are getting is going to be, very, very small compared to their endowments. Now I wonder, why don't they keep business as usual and just pull from their endowments until the dust settles? Okay, it would be hardly any cost. I personally don't think that they would do that. I think that they would want to, for political reasons, inflict maximum pain by not solving the problem themselves.
Yeah. George,
Uh,
let me stop you
yeah.
there because you've given us a lot to react to.
Sure.
Harvard just announced, you may have seen that they're making school free or very affordable for families up to, I think, $200,000 a year in
Correct.
income. So they're using some of the money for something that's pretty good use. But I take your point, Sean. Just your general reaction to what George asked about.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I feel for your daughter and the situation that she's going through. I think part of this is that there needs to be an evaluation of, I mean, what do we at $475 million was going to Columbia University, and I think there's an aspect of, for too long we've gotten punch drunk with money, and so there's an aspect of this which um, some review is warranted, and I also look at, I think, not just on the government end going out, but what are these organizations doing with the money? What are we doing to subsidize them? I think this is a whole separate discussion too, but also like what the costs, the operating costs of a lot of these schools, not just the Harvards and the Columbias, but all of them, has gotten way out of control for what they're supposed to be doing in terms of focusing on education. So I think there's there's the government funding part of it, and then there's the what are they doing with the money and how are they operating. But I get it. This is just, we at some point the roosters are going to come home, and we're at a point now where we need to do that.
Yeah,
Dan?
yeah, I agree with saving money everywhere. Um, uh, but and of course, universities, academia have been very, very poor stewards
Right.
of public funds and the public trust. There's no doubt about that, and they definitely have to fix things. I just I think it's an example of where it's been the wild wielding of the axe rather than more thoughtful implementation of cuts. I think it's a very good example of that. And it's something that, myself as a Trump supporter, feels very deeply. It's I don't agree with it.
Yeah. George, let Dan react.
Yeah, I think you just said it really well. I mean, this is one of the big frustrations with Doge. I mean, if you listen to that interview last night, it's all waste, fraud, and abuse. What you just described is not waste, fraud, and abuse. To Sean's point, you may say we should or should not be sending money to schools with large endowments. But as Mark said, the bigger Harvards get, the more students are going to go for free, which is on some level a very admirable, good quality. But this is the issue. And it's not just medical research, which we are the lead, one of, if not the world's leader in medical research and innovation. It's money that goes into things like agriculture technology and agriculture research. Again, everyone like poops and craps on the government as bureaucrats, and they think of condoms to Mozambique. And that's what they envision all these numbers and budgets as waste, lazy, fat government employees and waste. There is some of that, but 90+%, I go back to the previous person, good, hardworking people doing real work that impacts the real lives of real people in so many ways, you don't even realize it. And now that it's starting to be cut, more and more sectors are saying, time out, give us an exemption. Don't do this. Republican governors, Republican members of Congress, you can't do this, they're saying. So I do think as this happens, this is going to be litigated in the public opinion in politics, and we're going to see where the country lands.
George, thank you. We wish you and your daughter the best, and we hope you come back regularly and update us on how she solves this. I'm sure she will. Thank you,
Thanks,
sir.
guys.
Appreciate it. All right. Let's get Joshua Cook in here, please. Joshua, welcome in. Tell folks who don't know which M that is. Michigan,
It's Michigan.
Maryland, go blue. What's on your mind, sir? Tell us where you are.
Dan is right. That is Michigan M. So looking forward to the game tonight against Auburn.
But that is an Ohio State gray that the M is on, which is, I think, sacrilegious.
I would say Ohio State's more red and white.
More red, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Scarlet and gray.
Plus, Dan, you got to say the Ohio State.
Yeah.
Well done.
Joshua, welcome in. What's on your mind, sir? And
All right,
are you in Michigan, or are you in Michigan?
No, I currently live in Savannah, Georgia, but my wife and I are from Michigan.
Got it.
So still staunch Michigan fans. I had an observation and a question about the Signal story this week.
Yes,
so my observation is that this, in my memory, and I've only been paying attention to politics for a little bit, is the first Trump scandal where Trump is not at the center of it. And so I'm wondering, and this leads me to my question of, is there lasting impact on the political futures of the people in that chat? Mostly J.D. Vance, I would say, seeing as he is the seemingly front runner for the 2028 Republican nomination. So my question is does this have the potential to have the Hillary Clinton email-esque stain on her political future? Will it have that for J.D. Vance?
Dan.
Boy, that's a great flag. I had not thought of it in the sense that this is not a Trump thing per se, although I do think he'll suffer some collateral damage. I certainly think there are Republicans who are uncomfortable with what J.D. Vance said. So the substance of his argument that in 2028 or 2027, people may try to take advantage of, although the base may be more with J.D. than, let's say Senator Cotton. But it's interesting. I do think it's done some damage this week, and I do think it will stick around and be something. Of course, it could be very small potatoes in 4 years comparatively to what may be coming, but I do think it will be in the obituary, so to speak, of 2.0.
Sean.
So I think it's an interesting question overall that you're asking. That it was put to me this way in Trump 1 by someone who'd been around a long time, which was, in Trump world, you start with like $1 and it only goes down. And the question is how far down? I mean, how quick does that dollar deplete itself? And so, like, every time that you have a ding against you, you said something stupid, you did something, you lose money. And the question is, how quick do you go to zero? I think the one thing that's interesting specifically about JD is, one, everything that he said privately is consistent with what he says publicly. That's number one. Number two is what he says in that chat was, I don't think this is consistent with what the president says, right? He is not saying the president's wrong or I disagree with the president's goals here. In fact, he's saying, I think that we need to double back with the president and make sure that what we're doing is consistent with what his guidance is. I don't see Trump getting upset with that in the least. If JD says, look, here's what I said, which is, let's make sure we're doing exactly what he wants, because what pissed him off more than anything in the first Trump was people would walk out and say, I know what he said, but let's go around his back and do it differently. And so if what comes out in the text is, I want to be clear what the guidance was, and you saw Stephen Miller subsequently follow up with like, green light, we're good, I'm going to be the one that's the interpreter here. Then that's fine. The president's not going to get mad at someone because they want to actually do what he wants, which is how JD comes across. I get he didn't necessarily agree, but his words were, let's make sure we got this right. And I think that people are going to, in Trump world, are going to say, good for him.
Joshua, thank you for joining. Grateful to you. Good luck tonight.
Thank you.
Break a leg. Sean, what do you have on tonight?
Seb Gorka. We're bringing the fire, baby.
Dr. Gorka.
Going out hot.
All right, let me tell you about some things. Earlier in the week, we mentioned Sean's former co-host, my friend Lindsay Keith, who had the first two questions at the White House briefing and then was in the pool. She's going to be on two-way tonight at 6 o'clock Eastern time, along with some folks from Keep Our Republic, Wisconsin. We had folks from that group on during the election. They're very interested in the bipartisan attempt to make sure elections come out well and election workers, administrators are treated with the respect they deserve. So join me tonight, 6 o'clock Eastern time, final show of the week, at least barring breaking news, Lindsay Keith and members of the group Keep Our Republic. And then next week, more friends of Sean will be on two-way tonight. On Tuesday, 6 p.m. Eastern time, special guests, authors of a new book, co-authors, they also happen to be spouses, Dina Powell McCormick, Dave McCormick, senator from Pennsylvania, Who Believed in You, and some of the folks they feature in the book. It's a book about mentoring and encouragement, and as they say in the television business, you won't want to miss it. Dina, Dave, some special guests from the book, and your questions as always. So we'll see you for that Tuesday night at 6 p.m. Eastern time. Gentlemen, will you be watching basketball?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
And by the way, don't forget to watch the three of us on Megyn Kelly today. We will all be on.
That was going to be my big kicker. Dan, what time is that on?
12 o'clock.
12 Eastern time, Megyn Kelly. I will tell you, watching basketball in Europe on the night games is a little tricky. So,
Mark, I'll tell you, when I was in school over there, I watched a game outside a bar through the window through the night in the rain to watch the Knicks win against the Indiana Pacers in Game 6 years ago.
That's
great, fun,
very inspirational. I don't know how late are pubs
Adam's
open?
asking. I think Megan's on Sirius XM, guys, and I think she streams as well.
Yes,
you can watch it. You can listen to it live on Sirius XM, and then it will be on her YouTube channel a little bit after that. So either YouTube, Megyn Kelly, or Sirius XM.
And then Friendster and MySpace. It's a little delayed.
Friendster and MySpace.
AOL Messenger.
Grateful to everybody for a wonderful week, and I'm serious when I say we love when new people raise their hands. We had 2 or 3 people on this program on two-way tonight, almost every episode this week, and that's fantastic. As always, we're trying to encourage lots of different voices, and again, with the resurgence of the Democrats, the rise of the resistance, hope that more Democrats feel comfortable and confident about raising their hand and being part of the conversation here. It's extremely important this platform represent all voices across the spectrum, and we're grateful for everybody who participates. Thank you for watching. We'll see, 3 of us will see you on Megyn Kelly. I'll see you at 6 p.m. Eastern time. And then, believe it or not, all 3 of us will be back Monday morning, 9 a.m. Eastern time for the morning meeting. Have a great day.